Amish, you were talking about how much of a done deal this really is, this announcement of a trade deal with the UK, the president acknowledging the details still have to be written up. And I would assume that Congress would have to sort of seal the deal, no?
That is the case, but Republicans in Congress have made it very clear that they are trying to really march to the music of President Trump and that they're going to follow his lead here. I want to just touch on the Fed chair and what the president was just saying there, because we know that the president has said that he's very frustrated with Fed Chair Jerome Powell, but he has also said to Kristen Welker in that exclusive wide-ranging interview that he does not plan to fire Jerome Powell. And Jerome Powell has also said that he does not believe the president can fire him, and the courts have sort of backed that up, the idea that this is really an independent chair. So yes, the president is complaining about him, but from our understanding, as of now, Fed Chair Jerome Powell is going to continue to have his term until next year in 2026, and then he will likely, of course, be replaced. That being said, going back to the trade deal that we're talking about right now, the president has been touting this as a big win. It's interesting because this is the first, of course, big trade deal that he is announcing since Liberation Day when he rolled out those unilateral tariffs. I want to put up for people a bit of what the president said online. He said, together with our strong ally, the United Kingdom, we have reached the first historic trade deal since Liberation Day. As part of this deal, America will raise $6 billion in external revenue from 10% tariffs, $5 billion in new export opportunities for our great ranchers, farmers, and producers, and enhance the national security of both the U.S. and U.K. through the creation of an aluminum steel trading zone and a secure pharmaceutical supply chain. This deal, she said, shows that if you respect America and bring serious proposals to the table, America is open for business. And he also posted this graphic showing $5 billion going up, $6 billion going up, also putting out what those trade tariffs are. I also want to just note that the UK is also touting this. The UK Prime Minister put out a press release calling this a, quote, landmark deal. On the phone there in the Oval Office, the UK Prime Minister was saying that this is going to create jobs, that there's going to be all sorts of benefits for the UK. Brian walked us through sort of some of the different trade deals and details on the UK side. But I think what's interesting here is that we're now waiting to see what other deals come, especially when it comes to China, with that meeting happening in Switzerland between the U.S. and Chinese officials.
And so, Jean, let me get your reaction here. You've been listening in this whole time, this announcement. Does it live up to the hype we just heard from the president, from Lutnick, even Starmer and the UK ambassador?
Well, you know, the answer to that is obviously not at all. I might have thought it was a trade deal on fertilizer because there was a bit of that in the press conference. But let's step back and just for a moment think about how much this stresses the incoherence of the Trump trade policy. What was the great global emergency? He said it was that we have trade deficits in goods with other countries. So his first deal is with the UK, where we have a $12 to $14 billion trade surplus with them. So his first deal is with a country we have a trade surplus with. Also, it's a day after the UK just announced a deal with India, making very clear that you did not have to threaten the entire global economy to get this very marginal trade agreement. And really, let's focus on that. You have an economy that was a consensus soft landing, consensus strong, steady growth and lower inflation. Now you have an economy where there is consensus fears of recession and stagflation, all due completely to Trump's trade proposals. And so what do we get? We get something where he's telling us, and I know this is comforting to hundreds of millions of American families, that you can be assured that Bentleys and Rolls Royces will come in at a lower tariff rate if you can buy one of the first 100,000. And he says, well, he gets that they have to be made in the UK, so he doesn't want to raise prices on those luxury cars, but the clothes, the back-to-school clothes, the coffee, the avocados, the things that American consumers are relying on that you depend on other countries to provide, he is more than happy to keep a tariff on them. So truly, the incoherence of him really destroying the path of the U.S. economy over a goods trade deficit, doing a first agreement with a country we have a surplus with, and then making his headline deal about we're going to lower tariff on Bentleys and Rolls Royces. I mean, I think the only reason markets are up a little is not because this is a significant deal, but they think that if Trump will take this, maybe this is how he does his off-ramp. He just takes a lot of shallow PR deals. And so if people are happy about this, it's because they're hoping it shows that Trump will have a low bar for de-escalation, not that significance. And remember today, last thing I'll say, is you at the same time seen the EU just offer the potential of 100 billion euros in trade sanctions on us. So it's not to me a very reassuring day.
Right, the EU threatening additional tariffs that would be retaliatory against the U.S. if they can't come to some kind of a deal. Sarah, let me get your reaction. You've been inside these rooms. Your thoughts, or what was going through your mind as you heard all these officials around the president just lathering on the praise for him as the ultimate deal maker, including officials from the U.K.?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like this is a marginal deal and that it's not that big of a deal when we look at, I'm curious to see the details of how much there will be in change compared to what we previously had with the UK, compared to what this deal will shape up to look like, since it sounds like they're still ironing out the details. But it didn't surprise me to hear the cabinet officials and some of the UK officials kind of praising Trump and boosting his ego a bit and stroking his ego, because that's what they know they need to do. For the cabinet officials, it's what they do to keep their jobs and keep him happy. And then the UK officials also know that in order to negotiate the best deal for their country, that they need to stroke his ego. And so that's kind of, I think, what we saw take place there. I will point out, too, that this is the first deal that we've seen the Trump administration negotiate. But it's ironic because in Trump's recent Time magazine interview,
yeah, right now, Brian, the details are lacking, but the president did make this announcement on social media, calling it a full and comprehensive deal, one that's going to cement the relationship between these two countries for many years to come. Any reaction so far from the markets and from the business community?
Yeah, well, I mean, it seems like the announcement that, there will be some sort of announcement has markets excited. Currently, the markets are up. When you look at the S&P 500, up about 0.5%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up about the same. You can see over 230 points in the first 30 minutes of trading here. But again, I think a lot of the market movements and just the general business community reaction to this is going to depend on the details of this agreement. Yes, the president is saying on Truth Social that this is a full and comprehensive deal. Is it going to be a full and comprehensive deal? I think that given the speed and just also the nature of the trading relationship that we have right now, as Vaughn just interestingly pointed out, which is true, that the United States has a trade surplus with the UK as well, and also understanding that the United Kingdom isn't necessarily one of the largest trading partners with the United States, at least by volume and by dollar amount. Well, yes, maybe this is just at least the first step, but at least it seems like in the early trading that markets are at least a little bit optimistic that this could maybe be the first domino to fall in what could be these other trade deals, even if not as aggressively fast as the administration had promised with the 90 deals in 90 days.
We don't know how big of a deal this really is at this point. And Justin, it would be just one deal with one country after the White House has boasted they will sign dozens of deals by July. How do you see it?
Well, actually, we do know how much of a deal this is or could be, because we know a lot about our trading relationship with Britain. It's our 11th closest trading partner. It is responsible for 3% of total trade from the United States. And more than that, we can go a step further. Before all this began, we know the average tariff rate that the United Kingdom charged its trading partners was 1%. So that's the best you can do, is move that from 1 to 0. And I don't reckon he's done that. So there's a chance, I reckon, maybe he's got an average tariff rate, I'm just guessing because we haven't seen the agreement, down from 1% to 0.8%. From a trading partner that's worth 3% of our trade. So if this sounds like small potatoes to you, that's because these aren't potatoes. These are tiny little peas.
So, Neil, let me just reiterate what we have now heard from our guests and analysts here. Already, the UK buys more from the U.S. than it sells to America. So the U.S. has a trade surplus with Britain. That figure's rising. Why was the UK included in the broad tariffs to begin with? And how might today's announcement perhaps set the stage for other potential deals to come?
Yeah, look, the key of today's news and the reason the markets are up is because it does show that there are off-ramps from this trade war that can de-escalate on a country-by-country basis. On the other hand, as the other guests are saying, this was the low-hanging fruit. This was the easiest one because of the surplus, because of the size, the scale, even the historical relationship, the kind of special relationship between the U.S. and Britain. Look, the big ones are yet to come. You know, we're going to have this weekend talks between Secretary Bessent and the Chinese in Geneva. That's a much more consequential for the economy, for the world trading system. What becomes of that? Do these 145% tariffs on China, are those going to be de-escalated anytime soon, or is that something that we're going to be dealing with for weeks and months? That matters economically a whole lot more than anything that gets done with the UK.
Neil, do you think this gives Secretary Bessent any more leverage heading into those talks with China this weekend?
I'm not sure about that. You know, the other thing we don't know about the UK deal is this 10% tariff that's kind of the across the board minimum, is that going to remain in place on Britain? You know, if that's the case, that's a signal that even countries that do things right, that have a trade deficit with the US, that are kind of good partners, are still going to face these significant levies, which is a lot higher than we had this time 6 months ago. So you know, I'm not sure that a deal with the UK changes the equation with China. And again, the economics, the size, the scale of those 145% tariffs on Chinese imports, just a different order of magnitude than what we're talking about here today.
And Vaughn, wouldn't this all have to be approved by Congress? How long could that take?
Right. I don't want to sidestep your question, Anna, but I think that's a serious question here, is the extent to what the details are of this trade agreement.
What you have here is Donald backing down on tariffs, you know, trying to move away from his tariff plan, cancel his tariff plan, right? At the very least. Remember, Donald had mixed messaging, which is to say, in my opinion, his original messaging failed and he's pivoting hard and everyone notices it. Donald at first did not say that his tariff regime was a negotiating tactic. He originally said, this is what I want to do. I want to put essentially massive tariffs on everybody in the world, not only our adversaries, but also our closest allies and trading partners. And I'm doing it not because I want new deals. I'm doing it because this is what's good for the country. We're going to bring in the tariff money and we could lower our taxes on, like our taxes on citizens. We'll make more stuff in America. Jobs will be created. And that's what we're doing. It's not about new trade deals. Remember, that's what they said. They said it's not about that. And then very quickly when it started to fail and people got mad and the markets got mad and Trump's donors got mad, that's a big one. Republican congressmen and senators were like, rich people don't like this and we govern on behalf of rich people and rich people alone. So you need to pivot, Mr. President. Then he started saying, well, actually, guys, my real goal with the tariffs is to cancel the tariffs because I want you to have a trade deal. I want to have trade deals with everybody. But what we're seeing is the trade deals he's making are insignificant. They're not working. They're bad. They don't cover everything. So yes, he's canceling some tariffs, but he's also keeping some on that are failing. Donald, his plan crumbled immediately. And his pivots, they're far too little, far too late.